The 4th year with Barlow. He was tired of my dullness and predictability. He was enchanted by a young, avant-garde girl, yet he told his friends, "It's just about trying something new." Of course, I'd still choose a good girl like Sarah for marriage. With the wedding approaching, everyone urged me to think of the bigger picture. However, the wildest guy in the circle, Matt, stopped me. "Good girl, do you dare to rebel just once?" At the wedding 3 days later, Barlow looked at the hickey on my neck, so angry he could barely hold his bouquet. I smiled faintly. "It's just trying something new. Why are you so mad? Besides, after trying, I found out you're rather boring, not as fun as him." I had never seen this side of Barlow before, always the epitome of grace and gentlemanly demeanor. He now had his shirt buttons undone and was lounging lazily on the sofa. A beautiful girl with dyed pink hair boldly straddled his waist, kissing him passionately. His eyes were glazed with drunkenness, full of confusion and desire. Yet, at the last moment, he turned his face, letting the kiss barely brush the side of his face. "Barlow, don't you worry that Sarah might find out about your wild behavior? It's just trying something new." Barlow was nonchalant. "So what if she finds out?" "Right, you're about to get married, and the invitations are all sent out. A girl like her will just cry a little at most." Barlow lit a cigarette, laughing casually. "I know what I'm doing. Of course, I'll marry a good girl like her. A mistress should be charming and alluring, to be interesting." Laughter erupted, creating a chaotic scene. Barlow smirked, pinched the soft cheek of the girl beside him. "Change into your ballet practice clothes, and show them a bit." The girl giggled sweetly. "But I only want to dress for you." Barlow also smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Be good. Don't spoil the mood." The girl pouted and went to change. I stood outside the door for a while. When someone came out to take a phone call, they finally noticed me. "Are you here, sister-in-law? Barlow is drunk. He was just talking about you." I took a step back. "I'll pass. Don't disturb him watching the dance." The person seemed a bit awkward, silent for a moment. This was probably the first time I showed my displeasure, surprising him. As they said, I was known in the circle as the good girl. Barlow's recent antics were the talk of the town, but everyone, without exception, advised me to endure. Men are never faithful. "At least Barlow cares about you. The wedding is coming up. You need to think about the bigger picture and the family's reputations." I found it laughable. Why should I, the victim, have to uphold the family's reputations? "You all enjoy yourselves. I'm leaving, sister-in-law. Barlow is just finding some diversion. Don't follow me." I held back my tears and quickly walked away. But just as I reached the elevator, someone stopped me, wiping my tears. I frowned at the man in front of me. It was Matt, the notorious playboy in the circle. He wore a black windbreaker and matching cargo pants, with a cigarette hanging from his mouth. His gaze was rather reckless. In the midst of all the stylishly dressed people, his appearance seemed out of place. I had heard many unsavory rumors about him. Instinctively, I took a step back, keeping my distance. "Good girl." Matt took the cigarette out and raised an eyebrow at me. "Dare to rebel just once." I was wearing a light blue dress with a square neckline. My long black hair and light makeup made me the epitome of a lady in the eyes of the elders. Yet privately, I was mocked as a pitiful pushover and a soft target. Matt's gaze was defiant, with a new scar on his sharp jawline. It added a touch of recklessness to his already handsome face. I initially didn't want to engage, but Matt smiled again, looking down at me with a hint of mockery. "Forget it. I know you won't dare. It's boring." I half turned but then turned back. "Who says I don't dare?" Matt tossed the car keys in his hand. "Come with me." I clenched my handbag, straightened my shoulders, and walked into the elevator without looking sideways. Matt laughed and followed me into the elevator. The moment the elevator doors closed, Matt placed his hand on my waist. He pulled me into his arms. His scent was very different from Barlow's. It was overwhelmingly hormonal. Even the cigarette smell was stronger. I was momentarily uncomfortable and coughed a few times. Matt looked down at me from above, spoiled. "The cigarette smell is just too strong." I frowned, trying to push him away, but Matt's grip tightened. "I'm sorry. I'll shower later." "A shower won't help. The smell lingers." I turned my face away, wrinkling my nose to stay as far from him as possible. Matt chuckled, suddenly leaning down to kiss me. I'll quit today. Is that okay, darling? My face burned. I had been engaged to Barlow since I was 19. No, it had been exactly 4 years. Matt was the first man to kiss me besides him. By the time we reached the underground parking lot, the heat on my face hadn't faded. Matt drove a Hummer. We sped out of the city onto winding mountain roads, the car's speed increasing until we reached the summit. My heart raced, feeling both uncomfortable and thrilling. The sensation was indescribable. Matt opened the car door and helped me out. Can you stand? My legs were a bit weak but still able to walk, so I pushed his hand away and walked forward. Matt didn't insist. The observation deck at the summit offered a panoramic view of the city. The countless lights lay beneath me. The sky above was vast and starry, endless. The pent-up frustration in my heart seemed to dissipate. Matt stood beside me and took out a cigarette box. Then he had a thought, crumpled the cigarette box, and tossed it into the trash can. I watched his action and somehow smiled. What's so funny? Matt's tone was a bit harsh. He turned to me, grasped my chin. Sarah, if you keep smiling like that, I might just take you right here. I had heard Matt had numerous girlfriends in middle school. He was fickle and played around, but he had a handsome appearance, and many young girls cried to be with him. I was actually a bit anxious but tried to remain calm. Matt, aren't you worried you might have some illness? Do you want me to go to the hospital for a full checkup now? Matt held my chin and leaned in, his hot breath brushing my ear. Are you scared now? Isn't it a bit late? His words made me genuinely afraid. I pushed him away with force. Matt, I want to go home. Fine. He loosened his grip, his tall and solid frame lounging against the railing. His voice was lazily bad. Want to go home? Then walk back yourself. I seethed with anger, glaring at him before turning to walk down the mountain. A serial killer escaped a few days ago. They say he came up this mountain. That killer targets pretty girls, first assaulting then dismembering. Matt. My steps abruptly stopped. A cold mountain wind blew, and I was so frightened I rushed to Matt. He laughed loudly, then pulled me into a hug. Before I could recover from my fear, Matt held the back of my head and kissed me deeply. At first, I resisted and struggled. I even bit his lips, drawing blood. Sarah. He wiped away the blood with his hand, but his gaze was cold. My eyes were red, filled with fear and grievance. I want to go home. Matt suddenly smiled. Go home and continue being a puppet. Sarah, how much can you endure? I was stunned. Barlow was a rising star in the eyes of the elders, a refined and elegant young talent, but his true self behind closed doors was so unseemly. Everyone advised me to endure, but no one advised him not to hurt his future wife. Was it because the Margaret family had a higher status, and the Robbins family was climbing up? Why should I think of the bigger picture? Just because the invitations are sent and the wedding is in 3 days. No one cares if a puppet gets hurt. A child without a mother has already lost her biological father at the same time. No one cares for her. No one supports her, so there's no strength to cry out. Sarah. Matt's rough fingertips wiped away the tears from my eyes. As he leaned down to kiss me again, I heard a soft, "Don't cry. I'll take care of you from now on." Matt took me back to his home. He lived alone in a luxurious apartment at the top of the city center. He had bought and connected 2 penthouses on the top floor. It was very spacious but also very empty. When we entered, I noticed there were no signs of a woman ever being there. He turned off my phone and told me to shower. After the shower, we had a little red wine on the terrace. I rarely drank, so I didn't even know what I was like when drunk. Apparently, this was how I was. Matt's robe was pushed aside. I need to check first if you're clean, I mumbled, but my hands kept moving. Matt initially seemed to block me, but I glared and pushed his hand away. He just spread his long legs and half laid back, letting me do as I pleased. Matt's physique was top-notch. His skin was slightly dark, muscles well-defined and smooth, even relaxed. He had 6-pack abs. I reached out to poke and then went lower. Sarah. Matt grabbed my fingers. His voice was a bit hoarse. Think carefully. If you go another inch lower, you'll be in it for good. Are you scared? Or are you feeling guilty? I straddled his lap, patting his abs. Looking down at him, Are you afraid I'll find out you're not clean? Matt suddenly laughed. This laugh was different from the previous ones. It was pure, joyful, and heartfelt. I felt a flutter in my chest. He was truly good-looking. Sarah, go ahead and check. He released his grip. I struggled to tear my gaze away from his face. Then I slowly moved my gaze from his lower abdomen. Matt, it looks a bit cute. Matt suddenly coughed. In the next moment, he lifted me horizontally. Our bodies sank into the soft bed. Matt held my hands tightly and kissed me with a bit of runness. Sarah, you'll soon know how terrifying it is. Barlow returned to the wedding house at 3 a.m. when the avant-garde girl in ballet attire changed outfits and came out to dance. The atmosphere in the private room reached its peak. His mood, however, started to fall at that moment. It was nearly 2 a.m. Sarah hadn't called or sent a message. Perhaps she had heard some rumors, but her temper and personality were very gentle, and her family treated her poorly. She was always very dependent on him. As friends said, if she was angry, she'd be fine with a little coaxing. He knew he had been excessive, but he wasn't too worried. No call or message wasn't important. Sarah must not have gone to bed yet. She was waiting for him to come home. Barlow suddenly found the girl in front of him somewhat uninteresting. Sarah had learned ballet when she was young, but when she danced ballet, she was never like this. Her demeanor was pure. Yes, pure. Such a girl was the one he wanted to marry, worthy of being his wife. When the driver took him back to the wedding house, the entire house was dark. Barlow frowned slightly. As he got out of the car, he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He entered the main building, passed through the living room, and went up to the master bedroom. The master bedroom door was slightly ajar. He walked in and turned on the lights. Warm light filled the room. The large wedding bed was neatly made, and Sarah was not there. Barlow's drunkenness suddenly lifted. He hurried into the bathroom, checking room by room, but she wasn't there. Finally, he stopped and dialed Sarah's number, but it was turned off. Barlow suddenly felt a deep frustration. He threw his phone, loosened his tie, and sat on the sofa. Sarah must be really angry and probably went back to her own home. Yes, she could only go back to the Robbins house. Barlow suddenly felt at ease. The Robbins family would only urge her to come back immediately. They were more eager for the wedding. He was tired and had a severe headache. If Sarah were at home, she would cook him soup, give him a massage, and run a bath for him. But she wasn't here tonight. It didn't matter. At the latest, she would be back by tomorrow morning. And this time, he felt a bit guilty. So he would properly appease her. In front of her family, he would give her enough face. She was easy to soothe. He knew that well. When I woke up, it was nearly noon. The house was very quiet, and Matt was nowhere to be found. I lay in bed a little longer before lazily getting up. After washing up, I went to the terrace for some fresh air. I saw Matt downstairs in the garden, shirtless, washing a heavy motorcycle. The sun was shining brightly, and the spray from the high-pressure water even formed a faint rainbow. But the most eye-catching thing was still Matt. His honey-colored, toned muscles, smooth lines, and perfect shape. A simple pair of jeans, slightly loose at the waist, revealed his strong abdominal muscles. It was a wild, vigorous kind of sexiness. I couldn't help but recall the wildness of last night. His performance in bed later matched his appearance and persona. I couldn't even remember how many times I almost lost consciousness, and Matt kept asking, Sarah, is it cute? Do you like it? As my cheeks burned, Matt turned off the water and casually looked upstairs. Our gazes met, and I felt my face burn even more. I instinctively tried to back away, but Matt called out my name. Sarah. He leaned against the motorcycle, casually brushing his slightly damp hair back. His handsome face was fully revealed. Under the sun, he smiled at me with satisfaction and a hint of pride. That smug expression made me grind my teeth with annoyance. But what was rising from the bottom of my heart was an endless mix of sweetness and bitterness. I shot him a glance and turned to go into the room. When I changed and went downstairs, Matt was already waiting in the dining room. Hungry? Let's eat first. He naturally stood up and pulled me to sit beside him. The food, without exception, was to my taste. This surprised me a bit, but my appetite wasn't great. In 3 days, it would be my wedding with Barlow. The Robbins family had already accepted the dowry from the Margaret family. Over the years, Robbins' business had relied a lot on the Margaret family. To put it simply, it was the Robbins family that needed this marriage, not the Margaret family, and certainly not me. But no one in the Robbins family cared about these things. Don't like it, Matt, seeing that I seemed disinterested. Put down his chopsticks. Let's go out to eat, Matt. I poked at the porridge in my bowl, lost in thought. In 3 days, it's my wedding. You're going back. Matt looked at me with a blank expression. Sarah, do you really like him that much? I couldn't help but smile wryly. Maybe, liked him once, when we both first invested our hearts in each other. How could there not have been genuine affection? But later, when the other person grew tired and weary, how could it not be felt? Matt, I looked up at him, my eyes slightly red but still smiling. Can you make me happy for these 3 days? Matt seemed to want to smile too, and perhaps light up a cigarette, but he couldn't find the pack. He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a moment, and then slowly spoke. What about after 3 days, Sarah? After 3 days, are you going to watch me get married? Just pretend it was a dream. Don't you feel happy, Matt? I asked softly, but my voice lacked conviction. Matt smiled this time. Sarah, I'm definitely happy. Isn't that a win-win situation? I feigned nonchalance. A win-win, Matt murmured, his gaze fixed on my face. His smile turned back to the earlier kind. Sarah, it's all up to you, as long as you're happy. That night, Matt took me out for a ride on his motorcycle. We sped through the entire city, seemingly oblivious to anyone around us. Hidden beneath the helmet, I didn't have to worry about anything. I had never felt my soul so free. When I wildly waved my arms, and shouted out loud, the Sarah wrapped in layers of social constraints, seemed to shed another layer of her cocoon. And I didn't know that while I was enjoying my last moments of freedom, Barlow, my indifferent fiancé, would be growing restless due to my day-long disappearance. When I didn't answer his last call and remained unreachable, Barlow left the wedding house, and went out for a late-night gathering with friends. The girl who danced ballet that night was named Karen. Originally, after Barlow left midway due to a lack of interest, Karen thought he wouldn't come back for her, but to her surprise, Barlow came directly to her school in the middle of the night. As she left the dormitory, Karen had a wicked thought. Barlow was generous with his money, but he was about to get married. Karen could sense that Barlow's interest in her was just a fleeting novelty. One day, he would discard her like a used item. But Karen was also very clear that she would never find a man with better conditions than Barlow. She wanted to cash in on this opportunity, to secure a comfortable future for herself, even if she couldn't have a child. Tonight, it seemed even the heavens were helping her, as she was in her ovulation period. After leaving the dormitory, Karen took out the condoms she had prepared in advance. She punctured them one by one. Perhaps because she was still a student, Barlow didn't seem to be very cautious with her, and this opportunity, she was determined to seize. After several rounds of drinking, Barlow still seemed disinterested. Barlow, did your wife make a fuss when you got back last night? Barlow glanced at the man slouched on the sofa. Did she dare make a fuss with me? I thought she might have cried when she saw you with another girl. You came back in the middle of the night. I figured she'd argue with you. I didn't expect her temper to be so good. She could tolerate this. Barlow suddenly put down his glass. Did Sarah come by last night? Yes, I happened to run into her when I went out to take a call. We exchanged a few words. She cried. She seemed to. Her eyes were red. Barlow's displeasure seemed to dissipate almost instantly. So she was truly jealous and angry. That's why she was hiding away. With her phone turned off, Barlow's mood improved, and he looked at Karen beside him with renewed interest. The girl tonight. He was nearly unable to control himself due to her alluring perfume. Barlow pulled Karen into his arms, and she straddled him. Barlow, you won't leave me alone tonight, will you? He pinched Karen's cheek. Tonight is the last time. Let's enjoy ourselves. Why the last time? Because I'm getting married the day after tomorrow. So what if you're getting married? Does that mean you won't come out to play anymore? Barlow chuckled and lifted Karen. Once you're married, you naturally won't be out playing. He then turned to the people in the room. Listen up. His smile was somewhat rakish. but there was a hint of serious absurdity in his tone. In the future, I'll only have my wife as a woman, while Barlow and Karen were indulging in their frivolities. Matt took me to a small competition. The racers, each with their own girlfriends, were all there. Naturally, Matt had me with him. Matt, why the change this time? Yeah, Matt, you never used to bring women. Matt pretended to swing his helmet at them. The person yelped and hid behind me. Help, sister-in-law. I was momentarily stunned, and instinctively started to explain. But Matt looked at me and pulled me over. Don't bother with them. She's shy. Matt, so you're tender-hearted too, only because you're too beautiful. All right, the race is about to start. Matt ignored the others and helped me put on the helmet himself. The car might go a bit fast later. If you're scared, just tell me. I'm not afraid. Matt looked at me with a casual smile. Then if you are, hold on to me tightly. I'm not afraid. I didn't scream once on the way here. Matt didn't say more, just smiled. Once the race started, I realized that the earlier excitement was just child's play. As the speed picked up and we drifted through sharp turns, I finally screamed in fright and clung tightly to Matt's waist. Sarah, are you scared? In the gale, Matt shouted at me. I was clearly terrified, but I closed my eyes and shouted back, I'm not scared. Matt's laughter was wild and unrestrained, resonating in the fierce wind. Sarah, hold on tighter, even tighter. I obediently tightened my grip on him, and the car sped to its limit. Without a doubt, Matt took first place again. When we stopped at the finish line, he stopped the car and lifted me off it. My legs were too weak to stand, and he held me tightly, removing the helmet. The bright lights were extinguished in that instant. Only the distant and faint starlight remained above us. Matt lowered his head and deeply kissed me. Sarah, let's elope. Do you dare? His eyes were bright and mesmerizing, and the scar on his chin made him look fiercely attractive. I could feel the burning passion in his gaze. Perhaps love. No one could resist his allure, even the most timid and obedient Sarah. For a moment, I really wanted to nod, to leave everything behind and run away. Even if it meant wandering without a fixed home, it would be better than being controlled like this. But reality was so harsh. The last shred of rationality still bound me. I didn't answer, just stood on my tiptoes and kissed him. Matt, I want you. The stars at the mountain's peak still had a faint glow, but at the foot of the mountain, it was already deep and dark. The night was silent. Only the occasional faint moans from the car parked under the trees could be heard. The spacious back seat, Matt's clothes scattered, leaning on the car seat, one hand cradling my head. But soon, I had no strength left. I lay limp and wet against his chest. Matt chuckled, brushing away the damp hair on my forehead. Done already. I was too exhausted to speak. My mind muddled. How could such a cute thing become increasingly terrifying day by day? I felt like I was burning with fever, sweating profusely and shivering. Matt turned me onto my back. His tall and sturdy body, strong and powerful. I began to vaguely realize that I was attracted to strength. I liked this absolute dominance, liked Matt's assertiveness, but he was the only man who was soft-hearted towards me. We used to be only acquaintances, living in the capital, but with only a few brief encounters. The closest we had been was these past 2 days. Yet he seemed to have given me a great sense of security, despite having a face that looked like a philanderer, and a notorious reputation. He somehow made me feel I could trust him. I closed my eyes and let my senses take over. That night, Matt and I both reached the peak of our passion. I can't remember when it ended. I only remember that, when everything finally settled, I was wrapped in Matt's coat, sitting in his arms. We quietly embraced, and kissed lightly, waiting for dawn, waiting for everything to return to the starting point. On the last day, I spent the time at Matt's home. When I woke up, it was already 2 in the afternoon. I took a comfortable bath. As I stood in front of the sink, preparing to blow dry my hair, Matt walked in. He said nothing, just took the hairdryer from my hand. When my hair was half dry, I seemed to suddenly burst into tears. Matt set down the dryer, held my face, and kissed the tears from the corners of my eyes. I saw the faded red string on his left wrist in the mirror. It was tied with a diamond knot, and looked familiar. Have you been wearing this red string for a long time? Yeah, about 4 years. Which girl gave it to you? Matt smiled. I'm superstitious. I got it from a temple as a talisman. I think I had one like that too, but I don't know where it went. Sarah. Matt lowered his head, his forehead lightly touching mine. Are you going back? Yeah. I didn't dare look up at him, just gently touched the scar on his jaw. How did you get this injury? Racing injuries are normal. Be more careful in the future. I smiled lightly. After all, with a face like yours, scars aren't good. Is it just the face? The body is good too. Also very impressive in bed. A lot of tricks. Having dated so many, there are still some benefits. Sarah. I haven't dated before. Matt seemed reluctant to explain, frowning slightly. Maybe you won't believe it, but I've never been interested in women. Why? Too noisy. Matt looked down at me, brushing away the tear on my eyelash. Sarah, I'll wait for you, outside the chapel tomorrow. Don't worry, I won't pester you. If you don't come, I will never appear in front of you again. Matt, I wanted to say, don't do this. People already see you through tinted glasses. If you do something as absurd as this, your reputation will be completely ruined. After all, I'm engaged to Barlow. Everyone knows I'm marrying him. Sarah, we only live once. I hope you live freely and without restraint. After I returned to the wedding house, Barlow quickly came back. He was still smelling of alcohol, looking tired and haggard. He threw his suit jacket off, carelessly tossing it at the entrance. Sarah, he looked at me with an unexpectedly gentle gaze, which I hadn't seen in a long time. Wife. He came up to me, half squatting, holding my hand. Tomorrow is our wedding. Afterwards let's live well. Okay. I looked at the man in front of me. I couldn't deny that I had once liked him. I once had expectations for him. In the Robbins family, I wasn't valued and didn't receive affection. I had hoped that my future husband would love me wholeheartedly. I had fantasized about a future of mutual support and love with Barlow. But unfortunately, fantasy is just fantasy. I gently pulled my hand away. Go take a shower and rest. And you? I want to rest too. I need to get up early tomorrow. With that, I stood up and headed outside. The car from the Robbins family is coming soon. According to the rules, I have to stay at my family's house tonight. I'll take you out. Barlow acted like the most considerate husband in the world, personally seeing me off to the car. I sat in the car, watching him stand in the night, watching my car drive away. I wondered if this tenderness was even necessary. My phone suddenly rang a few times, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find a friend request from a stranger. After accepting, the person quickly sent a few photos and videos. Sarah, I didn't want to bother you, but Barlow is so ruthless and extreme. I only wanted his money, but now I've been fired. My reputation is ruined, and I'm left with nothing. Sarah, Barlow said he no longer loves you. Marrying you was only because you're clean. You're his first and only woman. Believe me, after you marry him, he won't settle down. Because Sarah, you can't be like me. After reading the girl's message, I opened the photos. Just a quick glance made me shudder and close them. The images were shockingly vile. In Barlow's eyes, having paid the money, he could do whatever he wanted with those girls. Should I thank him for at least not loving me? How could he still treat me with the respect of a wife, and not do something so disgusting to me? On the wedding day, I woke up very early, and I had made a final decision. After getting ready, I took out some documents from the safe in my room. Then I knocked on my father and stepmother's door. My biological mother came from a scholarly family, but passed away shortly after giving birth to me. She left me a small portion of Robbins' family shares, and some jewelry given to her by her maternal grandfather's family, when she married. I kept the pair of jade bangles that she loved and always wore. The rest I gave to them. The Robbins family raised me for 23 years. Consider these things my repayment for their upbringing. My father and stepmother were surprised. They had long wanted the inheritance my mother left me, but I had never agreed to give it up. I always felt it was the last thing my mother left for me, and I needed to keep it safe. But now I had come to understand. My mother died of depression. This shows that the Robbins family is not a good place to settle. Being a daughter of the Robbins family is not a good thing either. But as they always said, since I enjoyed their wealth and protection for over 20 years, I should naturally make sacrifices for the Robbins family. Now that I've given everything to them, I no longer owe the Robbins family anything. The dowry from the Margaret family was not in my hands. The business assistance provided by the Margaret family benefited my father and stepmother, and my stepmother's younger brother, so I do not owe the Margaret family either. As for the mess that follows, let the Margaret and Robbins families sort it out. My father, unaware of my intentions, praised me with satisfaction. You're getting married and finally understand the importance of giving back to your parents and elders. My stepmother also smiled warmly. In the future, you'll be the young mistress of the Margaret family. Your mother will surely be comforted in the afterlife. I smiled slightly and said nothing more. Remember, once you're married, you can't be temperamental. You've been shutting off your phone and disappearing for days. It's been very willful. Fortunately, Barlow hasn't been upset. If he had, the wedding could have been called off, and you'd have no one to blame but yourself. From now on, hold Barlow's heart tightly. Support the Robbins family well. If your maternal family is well, your life will be better. For the first time, my father's eyes showed genuine satisfaction. Perhaps to him, I was his most successful product sold, not his real daughter, a living, breathing person who can feel sadness and pain. With 30 minutes left before the wedding began, I removed my shawl. The wedding dress was beautiful and intricate, exposing my shoulders and back. The makeup artist smiled and said, "Sarah, let me cover up the marks here." She pointed to the hickey on the side of my neck. "You and Barlow seem very affectionate." I shook my head. "No need, just leave it as it is." The makeup artist adjusted my veil and dress. She handed me the bridal bouquet. Holding the bouquet, I stood up. The jade bangles from my mother were now on my wrist. As I stood up, they clinked together with a soft sound. The heavy fog in my heart seemed to be lifted by an invisible hand. Bright sunlight poured through the gap. I knew that from this moment on, everything would be different. As I walked out, my phone vibrated lightly. It was a message from Matt. "Sarah, I'm waiting for you." I didn't reply, put my phone back in my bag, and stepped out of the dressing room. From a distance, I saw Barlow, and he saw me. I saw the amazement and joy in his eyes. The dashing groom seemed even more charming and handsome on this triumphant day. I stopped in my tracks, feeling as though I was transported back to the year we first got engaged. It was also the anniversary of my mother's death. Barlow had accompanied me to the temple. I had personally made a red string of our knots, and had it blessed by the temple's abbot. I offered it at the Buddha's altar for 3 days and nights, happily intending to give it to Barlow. But he didn't believe in such things, and didn't seem to value my gesture. He just looked at it, without any intention of wearing it. I was a bit disappointed at the time, but I thought most men didn't like such things. It was normal. I shouldn't force others to match my preferences. That red string was later hung on the temple's wishing tree, along with my wish card. Even now, I still remember clearly what I wished for that day, to find one person's heart and stay together until the end. My vision suddenly blurred, and Barlow's face became indistinct. I had once genuinely liked him. The feelings back then were real, so I don't regret it. But now, I have truly moved on. Whoever wants to be the obedient girl can take on that role. I never had a rebellious phase, and when I finally wanted to rebel completely, it was indeed a bit frightening. When Barlow came over with the groom's bouquet in hand, the smile on his face froze in a ridiculous manner. He saw the hickeys on the side of my neck, patchy and varying in depth, and he remembered that we hadn't been together for a long time. His expression twisted into something bizarre, and he nearly dropped the bouquet. "Sarah, what's this? What did you do? Sarah, who have you been with these 3 days?" His voice was hoarse, and his eyes were filled with anger. I couldn't help but chuckle. "Just trying something new." "Why are you so angry? Or is it that only you can, and I can't?" "Just trying something new." Barlow repeated the words, suddenly throwing the bouquet down. The surrounding crowd was startled into silence by this sudden turn of events. Elders from the Robbins and Margaret families looked over. I raised an eyebrow and smiled calmly. "Yes, you've tried it. Isn't it addictive?" "Sarah." I took a slow step back. "I've tried it too. After trying, I found out you're actually quite boring, not as creative as he is." So, I placed the bouquet on the ground, looking at him with a deeper smile. "Barlow, I'm not marrying you anymore." As I said this, A momentary buzzing filled my ears. Then, as if I had lost my hearing, the whole world was eerily quiet. But after the silence, the world became vibrant again. I felt the last layer of my cocoon being completely shed. My body and soul were utterly free. I turned and walked out. The expressions of the Robbins family were quite something. My father and stepmother seemed completely stunned, standing still, until I had walked a long distance. My father's angry roar was heard, but I didn't look back. I held up the elaborate train of my wedding dress. I had secretly changed my high heels to comfortable sneakers. I began to run forward, crossing the well-maintained green lawn, passing through archways entwined with roses. When I finally ran out the big gate, I stopped and looked back. The noisy and chaotic crowd seemed like another ridiculous world. Once I passed through that gate, I wouldn't look back. Matt wasn't driving. He was rarely seen in a black suit, leaning against a heavy motorcycle. It was the first time I had seen him in a suit. The 4 words, "suit gangster," popped into my head. I really had gone astray. At that moment, I found myself thinking about how I wanted to be with him in a suit. His hair seemed specially styled, looking particularly sharp, as if he were the groom getting married today. I stopped, standing in the sunlight, looking at him, and he saw me too. The moment he saw me, he stood up straight. The usually unruly person was nervously pressing his lips together. His eyes were filled with joy, disbelief, and more so, tender concern. "Sarah," he called my name softly. With long strides, he quickly reached me. My wedding dress billowed out, creating layers of rippling waves in the air. The surrounding greenery swirled, painting the entire blue sky with dappled colors. "Matt, I feel so dizzy. Please put me down," I almost screamed, holding him tightly, trembling and pleading. He obediently stopped. But when he did, he kissed me fiercely. "Sarah, do you know, I didn't sleep at all last night. I finally experienced what it means to feel time dragging on." Matt held me tightly, as if he would let go, and I would fly away. "From now on, you can't be out of my sight for even a minute. Didn't you say you wanted to live freely? You just go ahead and be free. I'll follow you, always follow me, always follow you. Never get bored, never tire of it. Never want to try something new. I've kept myself pure for 26 years, waiting for this day. Only a fool would do such a stupid thing." "So, that day was it your first time?" I was surprised because that night, he didn't seem like a novice. "Was it particularly exceptional? A long-lasting experience that impressed you?" Matt was proud yet somewhat embarrassed. I couldn't help but laugh. Matt leaned down and kissed me again. "You don't know how hard I've endured to make sure you wouldn't despise me, to make sure you're comfortable. Well, I'll reward you tonight." I tilted my face, kissed him. "But you have to wear this suit." When Barlow chased after us, he saw me getting on the back of Matt's motorcycle. He was furious, but I calmly gave him the middle finger. The motorcycle roared away, and whether Barlow chased after us or not, Matt and I didn't seem to care. He took me through the busy city. Not sure how long we traveled, until we suddenly stopped. It was a unique custom studio. Matt took me inside, where a pretty assistant brought out a handmade wedding dress. It was very simple and elegant, with ballet elements subtly added. I instantly loved it. Matt urged me to change into the dress. Once I was dressed, the assistant named Erin helped me undo my hair. She styled it into a sleek bun. When I emerged in the new look, Matt's eyes lit up, making Erin chuckle. "Do you like it?" I twirled with the hem of the dress, performing a standard ballet gesture, smiling at Matt. He stared at me, suddenly with tears in his eyes. "Matt, what's wrong?" I was a bit surprised. After a while, he seemed to stabilize his emotions. "Sarah, do you remember how long it's been since you danced?" I was stunned. Specifically, since I got engaged to Barlow. My father and stepmother had forbidden me from continuing ballet. They said that as a young mistress of the Margaret family, performing on stage wasn't appropriate for my status. Their few words easily crushed my dreams and aspirations. Back then, at 19, I was used to being compliant and obedient. I mustered the courage to try to fight for myself. After being rejected, I just hid, and cried, and then accepted fate's arrangement. Later, during the 6 months when my relationship with Barlow was best, I had asked him if I could continue ballet. What did Barlow say? Isn't it good enough to be a pampered young mistress? Ballet is so tough. Look at how your feet are deformed. Don't you think it's ugly? At that time, I liked him so much, and he was all I saw. A girl always hopes to be perfect in the eyes of the person she likes. I was no different. After that, I didn't even dare to let Barlow see my feet. Sarah, you don't know, but you were glowing just now. As the tears fell, Matt held me tightly. I want you to be dazzling, Sarah, just like when I first saw you dance, radiant and unstoppable. You've seen me dance. Actually, I've seen every performance of yours. Matt and I went to many places. We didn't have a wedding, but it felt like we were traveling and getting married. Aaron had made many beautiful dresses for me. When we left that day, Matt took them all. He seemed to especially enjoy seeing me dressed up and going to every beautiful place in the world. I don't know when he started preparing this or how long he spent, and perhaps I'll never know this part of his intention. So, what was his feeling while preparing all this? I couldn't bear to imagine, but fate's blessing, I didn't miss out after all. When preparing to return to the capital city, it was already late autumn. 2 months had passed since the wedding, but clearly, the storm was far from over. The Margaret family was retaliating against the Robbins family, suppressing them in business, and Barlow's reaction was beyond my imagination. He gave his only media interview, in which he said, "My wife Sarah was maliciously influenced and made a foolish mistake. She is innocent and the well-known obedient girl of the capital. Everyone knows what kind of reputation the young master of the Evan family has. I don't know what means he used to deceive my wife into eloping with him. I will not let this matter rest, but for my wife Sarah, I am still willing to give her one last chance. As long as she returns, the door of the Margaret family will remain open to her. I, Barlow, will also forgive and forget." His deep affection was moving. Once these words were out, Matt, already infamous, faced even more public condemnation. People believed I, the obedient girl, was deceived by Matt, and Barlow's willingness to give me a chance to come back was something I should be extremely grateful for. If it were the old me, I would be trembling with fear, afraid of damaged reputation, unable to wash away the stain on me, afraid of being criticized and blamed, and of bringing shame to my deceased mother. But nowadays, I no longer care about such superficial reputations. On the day I returned to Beijing, I went to see Barlow. "Do you remember Karen?" I got straight to the point. Barlow's expression changed immediately. Of course, he remembered. That woman had tried to trap him with a child by deliberately sabotaging a condom. Such underhanded and despicable tactics and traps were, to be honest, quite familiar to him, so he had seen through it easily. Not only did Karen's efforts come to nothing, but he had used a few measures to get her expelled from the school. This matter had already faded away without a trace. Barlow was somewhat puzzled about how I knew. "If you don't want your family elders and the media to know about those dirty deeds of hers, don't let the media spread damaging rumors about Matt's reputation." I showed Barlow one of the photos. "You wouldn't want these photos to be seen by others, would you?" Barlow's face showed undeniable anger and surprise. "So you're doing this for Matt? Sarah, do you care so much about him?" "I'm just stating the facts. Matt didn't deceive me or manipulate me. All the decisions I've made are simply because I want to." "And what about your reputation, Sarah?" "I don't care." "What about your mother? Don't you care about her?" I stood up and smiled. "My mother probably wouldn't want me to be a puppet. But Sarah, can a man like Matt be relied upon? Do you know how absurd his past is? More absurd than yours. You have such a good reputation, but what's the reality? Sarah, you're still too naive. All men are the same. They go through periods of weariness and boredom. So should I just turn a blind eye and endure it forever? And if Matt were to be like that someday?" "He won't." "How can you be so sure he won't?" "I am quite certain. Maybe it's the red string that I haven't taken off for 4 years. Maybe it's the diary he keeps in his study, filled with my name. Maybe it's the hundreds of photos he took of me during my performances. Maybe it's the way his gaze is always focused and sincere. Maybe it's how he gave me the courage to pursue my dreams. A good partner makes the other person better." Shining brightly, Barlow only wanted me to be a virtuous wife and mother, confined in a beautiful house, a lovely ornament. Matt makes me a carefree yet confident person. I just run forward, and he is always behind me. The year Matt and I registered our marriage, Karen, who had disappeared for a long time, suddenly made a big move. Perhaps because life had been too harsh, perhaps because she couldn't let go of her hatred for Barlow. Karen used those photos to exchange for a large sum of money. Then she disappeared. Overnight, those photos spread to every corner of the city. Barlow's reputation was ruined, abandoned by his family, and replaced by someone else. And after people cleared up the timeline, the reputation of Matt and me naturally began to improve. But we, Matt and I, remained the same. We laughed it off, and didn't care anymore. On the day we received our marriage certificate, I took Matt to a temple. In the temple was a perpetual light that I had lit for my mother. Matt and I knelt in front of her spirit tablet for a long time. Later, when I got up, Matt asked me to go outside first, saying he wanted to speak with my mother alone. I didn't know what he wanted to say, but I left him to it. While he was speaking, I went to the wishing tree. I found the wish tag I had hung up years ago. The red string had been stolen by Matt, but the wish tag was still there. I noticed that there was another tag next to it. Someone had tightly bound it with red thread to mine. The handwriting on the tag was bold and strong. I immediately recognized it as Matt's. He had written 2 sentences. Sarah, can I see you earlier? Holding the wish tag, tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. The temple was bustling with visitors, and the noise was overwhelming. I heard someone calling my name loudly. Turning around, I saw Matt's figure. He was standing on the steps, dressed in white and black, looking handsome and striking. At the moment he saw me, his face softened with a gentle smile. I smiled through my tears and waved at him. Matt, I see you. This concludes the story. Thank you for reading. Feel free to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest updates, with a large number of novels updated daily.